Back in 2017, there was a story that went viral in Thailand regarding an apartment building. This chilling account came from a college student in Thailand who actually thought he was moving closer to campus. But instead, he stepped into something far darker than he expected. Tonight, I've translated this experience to share with you all. So let's settle in, turn down the lights, and let's uncover what really happened inside apartment 413. At the time, there was a popular Thai radio station known for one thing. It invited listeners to call in and share their real-life encounters with the supernatural, ghost stories, unexplained sightings, and just terrifying experiences in general. Nothing was off limits. So one night, a caller, let's just call him Dennis, phoned in with a story that was so disturbing it went viral around Thailand. At the time, Dennis was just about to begin his university journey in Thailand. Like many other students, he was full of hope and just eager to take that first big step into adulthood. His family home was pretty far from campus, so naturally, he started looking for a place that was a little closer to school. Somewhere more convenient, somewhere affordable, and of course, somewhere he could finally call his own. It was supposed to be a fresh start, his first time living away from his parents, the beginning of something new, exciting, and just completely normal. Before the semester started, Dennis spent several days apartment hunting. He had a short list of criteria: something affordable, something that was close to campus, and ideally somewhere that was newly renovated. But with a tight budget, that combination was nearly impossible. Every place he visited was missing something. It was either too far, or too run down, or simply just way out of his price range. So after checking out about 10 different units and still coming up empty, the excitement of moving out was pretty quickly turned into frustration. Feeling pretty drained and discouraged, Dennis decided to hit pause. He went to visit a friend who lived nearby, thinking it would be a nice time to meet up with him and maybe get some advice. Maybe he could help point him in the right direction. When Dennis first arrived at his friend's apartment building, he was pretty impressed. The place was pretty clean, it was modern, and surprisingly within his budget. And best of all, it was just a 10-minute walk to campus. It checked every box he'd been looking for. Dennis couldn't believe it. After days of disappointment, this felt like the perfect match. He even joked to himself, I should have came here first. Would have saved me a lot of time. But sometimes, as we all know, the perfect place hides the darkest secrets. For Dennis, the decision was instant. This was the place. Modern, affordable, close to school. It felt like everything had finally lined up for him. Eager to lock it down, he asked his friend if he could introduce the landlord to him, hoping a friendly referral might even score him a discount. But his friend shook his head. No one really knows the landlord, he explained. Everything's handled through a management company. They run the whole building, rent, maintenance, all of it. There's a lady in charge. She works out of an office on the ground floor. They immediately head down together. The lady from the management company was right there in the office, just like his friend said. But when Dennis asked about the available units, she shook her head. I'm so sorry, but we're completely full, she told him. Nothing's available at the moment. Dennis kind of expected that answer, but still, it stung. Just when he thought he found the perfect place, it slipped through his fingers. Not wanting to give up so easily, he reached into his wallet and discreetly slipped her a 100 baht bill. Just a small gesture, barely $3, but enough to make an impression. Please call me the moment something opens up, he said. Any unit, I'll take it. It doesn't matter how late it is at night. Whatever opens up, please call me right away. It wasn't much, just a small tip. But the woman's reaction? You'd think Dennis handed her a winning lottery ticket or something. She beamed with gratitude, nodding eagerly. I'll see what I can do, she said. If anything comes up, I'll give you a call right away. Dennis thanked her, but deep down, he didn't really expect much. Buildings like this don't really sit empty for long. and it already sounded like everything was full. But that night, just a few hours later, his phone rang. It was her, the same woman from the management office. "A unit just opened up," she said. "If you have time tomorrow morning, swing by, take a look if you want. And if you want it, it's ready for moving." After hanging up, Dennis sat with the news for a moment, and something didn't sit right. Just that morning, the woman had confidently told him the building was completely full, every unit taken. And now, suddenly, there's one available? Just like that? Didn't make any sense. Instead of excitement, a strange feeling started to creep in. He should have been thrilled, but instead, he felt uneasy, like something was off. And in hindsight, that quiet discomfort, it was the first warning. The next morning, Dennis returned to the apartment building, eager, but still carrying that faint sense of unease. The lady from the management office was already waiting for him in the lobby, all smiles. She greeted him with cheerful energy, like they were old friends. They made a little small talk and she led him toward the stairs, Dennis remembering she had said the unit was on the 4th floor. But when they reached the 2nd floor, she suddenly stopped. "Wait," Dennis asked, "aren't we going to the 4th floor?" She smiled again, but this time, something about it felt off. "Oh yes, it is on the 4th floor, but I just remembered I need to go take care of something in the office," she said, handing him a single key. "Here, go ahead and check it out. If you like it, just come back downstairs and we'll get the lease all sorted out." Dennis took the key and watched as the woman quickly disappeared back down the stairs. He looked down at the key in his hand. It was just a standard key, but then his eyes settled on the keychain attached to it. Room 413. The number stamped into the metal. Nothing fancy, just cold, worn numbers. But the moment he read it, something inside of him sank. He didn't know why. There was no reason for it. But standing there, alone in the stairwell, holding that key to apartment 413, he felt uneasy, a quiet discomfort, like he didn't even want the apartment anymore before even seeing it. But he figured he might as well go and see it, since he's already here. Also, he probably won't have another chance to live here if he doesn't hop on this opportunity, because it'll probably be swooped up pretty quickly. Dennis reached the 4th floor and stood outside the unit, apartment 413. He slid the key into the lock. He immediately noticed something was strange. The lock didn't turn smoothly. Instead, it resisted, stiff, like it hadn't been opened in a long time. When he finally got it to budge, the sound it made was a sharp, dry, scraping metal. Then came the door itself. As he pushed it open, it didn't swing freely like most doors. Instead, it dragged against the frame, groaning slightly, as if it was stuck in place, protesting every inch. It felt like no one had opened the doors in years. Once inside the unit, it was surprisingly normal. It was already furnished, very modest. There was a study desk set in the corner, a simple twin-sized bed, and overhead there was a large ceiling fan that hung still. Its blades were coated with a light layer of dust. Nothing seemed broken. Nothing seemed eerie. In fact, the place looked barely lived in at all, just untouched for a while. A little bit dusty everywhere, but a little cleaning session will sort that all out. The layout was nearly identical to his friend's unit in the same building. Dennis took a little walk through the apartment, checking every corner, just making sure everything seemed in place. Until he turned around and noticed something weird. On the back of the front door, taped carefully in the center, was a talisman. It was the kind used in spiritual practices. It's usually meant to ward off bad energy or something worse. Dennis froze for a moment, just staring at it. why was it there? He tried to laugh it off. Maybe the feng shui here is just really that bad, he thought. Maybe the last tenant was superstitious. But then another thought crept in. What if someone died in this apartment? Right then and there, Dennis made up his mind. Nope, he wasn't going to take this apartment. Back downstairs, Dennis returned to the office with the key in his hand and a decision made. He told the woman he decided to pass on the unit. It's just not for me, he said. The talisman on the door, it just really creeped me out. For a moment, the woman's smile faltered just slightly. Then she quickly recovered. "Oh, that silly thing," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "That was from the last tenant. They were very superstitious. It's not a bad sign. It's actually very good for you. It's for good luck. It's just decoration. Nothing to worry about." She kept urging him to reconsider. "It's a good unit," she said. "Very lucky, clean, safe. These rooms don't open up very often, you know." Then she sweetened the deal. "Look," she said. "If it's about the talisman, I can lower the rent from 2,500 baht to 2,000 baht. That's around 60 USD total for rent. And the deposit," she quickly added, "we can drop that too, from 7,000 down to 4,000 baht. That's about 120 US dollars. The way she was slashing prices left and right, it didn't feel like a deal anymore. It felt like a clearance sale. Dennis couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong with the room. That talisman, the dusty furniture, the way the door opened like it hadn't been opened in years. It all felt off. But then he did the math. These discounts would save him a huge chunk of money, month after month. For a broke college student, this was hard to ignore. He started imagining all the things he could afford now. New shoes, a better laptop, maybe even a little extra for a weekend outing. So he ignored the knots in his stomach, pushed down the instinct whispering that something wasn't right. And right then and there, Dennis signed the lease. Moving day came around, and Dennis arrived at the building with boxes stacked high, bags slung over his shoulder, ready to start this new chapter. As he entered the lobby, the security guard, friendly and relaxed, spotted him struggling and offered to help. He grabbed Dennis's fan in one hand and a coffee maker in the other, and casually asked, "Which unit are you heading into?" Dennis smiled. "Room 413. The moment the words left his mouth, everything changed. The guard's face dropped. His cheerful demeanor vanished. His smile vanished. Without a word, he set the items back down gently, then looked at Dennis and said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I just remembered. I have to go out and buy something." And just like that, he turned and walked off. Dennis stood there, confused. Why offer to help if he had somewhere to be? And who runs errands in the middle of a shift like that? It was a really strange reaction, but once again, Dennis brushed it off. Since the security guard ditched him, Dennis pulled out his phone and called his friend, the same one who lived in the building. Thankfully, he picked up right away and came down to help. The two of them lugged Dennis's things up to the 4th floor, sweating and laughing through the effort. Once everything was inside, they even took the time to wipe the place down together, dust off the fan blades, clean the desk, sweep the floor. It was actually pretty fun to be doing this with a friend. By the time they were done, they were both exhausted. His friend gave him a pat on the shoulder and headed back to his own unit. Dennis shut the door, locked it behind him, and dropped onto the bed to rest a bit. Dennis shut his eyes just for a moment. The heat of the day clung to him, and after hauling boxes and cleaning every corner, he was drained. He laid there on the bed, arms sprawled wide, eyes closed, breathing slowly. Then, that feeling, the unmistakable sensation that someone was watching him. His eyes snapped open, and there, sitting quietly in the chair by the desk, was a young woman. She was beautiful, gorgeous, short black hair that framed her face just down to her chin. She sat calmly, legs crossed, smiling gently at him, like she had been waiting there the whole time. Dennis didn't feel scared. In fact, he wasn't afraid at all. She was stunning. So much of that fear never even had a chance to rise. Instead, he just stared, confused. When did she come in? How did she come in? Why didn't I hear the door? The young woman stood up slowly and walked toward him, her smile never fading. Her presence felt soft, almost dreamlike. Then, standing at the edge of the bed, she tilted her head and asked in the sweetest voice, "Is it okay if I live here with you?" As stunning as she was, Dennis hesitated. The rational part of him kicked in. "No," he said, sitting up slightly. "I don't even know you. You can't live here with me." The woman's expression froze. Her gentle smile vanished in an instant, and right before his eyes, her face began to change. Her skin turned pale, ghastly pale. Her eyes grew darker. Her entire expression twisted from soft and sweet to cold and terrifying. Then she screamed, "Can I live here with you?" Her voice wasn't soft anymore. It was shrill, angry, echoing through the tiny room like it came from every direction at once. Before Dennis could move, he jolted awake. Gasping, sweating, still laying in the bed. The room was empty. He must have fallen asleep as soon as he laid down before. It had only been a nightmare. Dennis slowly sat up from the bed, still groggy, his heart still pounding. He looked over at the clock. It was now 1:30 a.m. He fell asleep for hours. His shirt clung to him with sweat. His hands were clammy. That scream still echoed faintly in his ears. It was one of the most vivid nightmares he's ever had. He looked around the room, half expecting to see someone still there. But the place was quiet. It was empty. It was just him in there. Still, something about the air felt heavy, off. Dennis didn't take any chances. For the rest of the night, every light in the apartment stayed on. No more nightmares that night. The next day felt normal. Dennis spent it unpacking the rest of his things, cleaning up, and just making sure the space feels more like home. By evening, he cooked himself dinner, watched some YouTube on his laptop, took a shower, and then he climbed into bed. It was, by all appearances, just another quiet night. Probably a very similar routine to you and me. But the moment he fell asleep, he saw her again. The same girl from the dream last night. She was sitting in the same chair by his desk again. But this time, something was different. She wasn't looking at him. Her head was tilted downward, her hair hanging in front of her face like a curtain. The air in the room felt colder, heavier. And then, she looked up. Gone was the flawless, beautiful girl from the night before. Her face was pale, sickly, covered in bruises, deep purple, sickly greens, like she had been beaten. Her eyes were swollen, her lips cracked. The sight of her was no longer mesmerizing, it was horrifying. Dennis couldn't move, couldn't speak. All he could do was watch. She stood up slowly. Step by slow step, she crossed the room and climbed onto the bed. She stared down at him, her expression blank. Then, she sat down on his chest. Dennis gasped, or tried to, but no air came. It was like a weight was pressing down on him, heavier than anything he'd ever felt. He wanted to scream, he wanted to push her off, but his body wouldn't move. He was paralyzed. Her hands began to rise, slowly, deliberately, reaching for his throat. Dennis was suffocating, trapped, terrified. Inside his mind, he began to pray to every single god he had ever known or heard of, Jesus, Buddha, anyone. Nothing came. Dennis had never been religious, and now, in the most desperate moment of his life, the silence felt like punishment. But then, through the panic, through the weight, through the tears that began to form on the corner of his eyes, one image came to him. His mother, the only person who had always been there for him, the only person he could really trust. In a final act of desperation, Dennis was able to cry out, not in his mind, but out loud, "Mama!" And as soon as the girl heard this, she was gone. The girl vanished. The weight lifted. Dennis gasped for air, like he had been drowning. Did she feel pity for him? Did she see that in that cry, that he was just a scared kid, still calling out for his mother? The moment she vanished, Dennis jolted awake. He was drenched in sweat again. His breathing was ragged. His heart was pounding so loud, it felt like it echoed in the silence of the room. He looked over at the clock, 1:30 a.m. Again. Same time as the night before. Dennis sat up slowly, staring at the walls of apartment 413, unsure if he was even awake anymore. The dreams the past 2 nights were so vivid, he can't tell what's real anymore. And then, the pain. His chest still ached, not in his mind, physically, as if something heavy had truly been pressing down on him. Was it just sleep paralysis? A vivid nightmare? Or was it something more? Dennis was no longer sure what was real. After 2 terrifying nights, Dennis has had enough. He sat on the edge of the bed, still shaken, the ache in his chest a grim reminder that something real was happening here, even though if no one else could see it. He picked up his phone and called the one person he could count on, his friend from the same building. "Can you sleep over tonight?" Dennis asked, trying to keep his voice steady. I don't want to be alone right now." Without hesitation, his friend agreed. Within minutes, there was a knock on the door. The friend stepped in, took one look at Dennis, and knew that this wasn't just nerves or homesickness. Something was seriously wrong. Dennis told him everything. The girl, the dreams, the pressure on his chest, waking up both nights at exactly 1:30 a.m. They sat together in that dimly lit room, the weight of it all pressing down on both of them. After a long silence, the friend finally said, "You should probably go to the temple tomorrow. Go pray. Maybe that'll help." Neither of them were really religious, but at this point, they were out of options. The very next morning, Dennis followed through. He went straight to the temple. He bowed his head, lit incense, and prayed harder than he had ever prayed in his life. Not just out of fear, but desperation. Before leaving, he purchased a large statue of the Buddha. Simple, serene, and carved with care. A symbol of peace, and hopefully, protection. Back at his apartment, Dennis placed the statue on his desk, facing the bed directly, watching over him. He stood back and looked at it. Something about its presence made the room feel lighter already, calmer. "This is it," he told himself. "I've done what I needed to do. I've prayed. I've brought Buddha into this space. I'm protected now. Finally, I'll get a good night's sleep." It was Dennis's 3rd night in apartment 413. But tonight, he wasn't afraid. With the Buddha statue watching over him, and prayers still fresh from that morning's temple visit, Dennis climbed into bed with a strange sense of confidence. It's over, he thought. Whatever that was, it's gone now. He was wrong. The moment he drifted off to sleep, she returned. The same girl, in the same chair by his desk, her head down, unmoving. Dennis didn't want to look. He knew he shouldn't, but he couldn't help himself. The moment his eyes met her, she began to move again. Her limbs were covered in bruises, dark, discolored patches from shoulder to ankle, but this time she didn't look at him. She looked past him. Then, slowly, she stood, and behind her she dragged the chair, its legs screeching across the floor in a sound that clawed into Dennis's spine. He watched her as she walked toward the center of the room just beneath the ceiling fan. And then he saw it, a thick rope wrapped around her neck. Fresh scars, raw and angry, circled her throat, like it had been tied there before. Dennis couldn't move, couldn't scream. He watched, helpless, as she positioned the chair beneath the fan, stepped onto it. And then she tied the loose end of the rope onto the fan. Then, without hesitation, she kicked the chair away. Her body dropped. She hung there, thrashing violently, her legs spasming, her arms clawing at the rope, her tongue extended fully out of her mouth as if trying to scream. Her eyes bulged, locking with Dennis's, staring directly at him as her body convulsed. It was unbearable. Then she went still, limp, lifeless. The room fell silent, completely. Dennis could hear nothing but his own breath, shallow, terrified, ragged. He couldn't move, couldn't even blink. He was frozen, staring at the body above him, still swaying gently from the fan. Then suddenly, her eyes snapped open. And then she smiled, a slow, unnatural twist of the mouth. Then came the laughter. Not soft, not human, loud, piercing, twisted. Dennis was screaming inside. Nothing came out. His body just wouldn't respond. The laughter grew louder, more hysterical, and then he wet himself, laying there in the bed, soaked in terror and humiliation. Dennis could do nothing but shake. The woman saw this, and that only made her laugh harder. No prayer worked. Calling out to his mother didn't work. Not tonight. Dennis tried everything, every chant he could remember from the temple, every desperate plea in his head, even calling out for his mother like he had before. But the laughter just kept going, wild, echoing off every wall, filling the entire apartment like it was alive. It felt endless, until finally, after what felt like an eternity, Dennis felt his body start to respond. He jerked violently, shaking himself awake, and then with one final desperate push, he woke up. So hard, in fact, that he rolled over the bed and fell off and hit the floor. Soaked in sweat and urine, he scrambled to his feet and bolted onto the balcony, gasping for air. His heart was racing. His hands were shaking. But outside, under the open night sky, he felt just enough clarity to look back into the room. No hanging woman, no laughter. It was just another nightmare. Or so he thought. He turned his head toward the clock at the wall. 1:30 a.m. once again. Then something caught his eye. The chair, the same chair from the dream, was now flipped upside down, laying directly under the ceiling fan, right where she had kicked it. Dennis's breath caught in his throat. He turned slowly toward the desk. The statue of the Buddha, the one he had placed carefully to watch over him, was now facing the wall. It had turned 180 degrees. No wind could have done that. Someone had moved it. If this spirit was strong enough to mock his faith, to physically move a sacred object, then maybe it made sense why none of his prayers had worked. Not even the cry for his mother could save him this time. And yet, one pattern remained. Every time, every single time, it all ended when the clock struck 1:30 a.m. Dennis couldn't take it anymore. Terrified, humiliated, shaking from head to toe, he bolted, still soaked in sweat and piss. He ran out of apartment 413 in his pajamas, crying, barefoot, leaving everything behind. His phone, his wallet, his ID, none of it mattered. All he wanted was out. Down in the lobby, the security guard, who had already seen signs something was wrong, was startled to see Dennis in such a state. "What happened?" he asked. But Dennis didn't answer. All he could say was, "Can I borrow your phone, please? I really need to call my friend to get me." The guard handed it over without hesitation. Dennis shakily dialed his friend's number, the same friend who helped him move in, who'd seen the apartment before all this started. "Can I stay with you tonight?" he asked, voice cracking. I can't get back in there. I can't go back in my room." Minutes later, the friend appeared at the lobby, worry written all over his face. He didn't ask questions, he just took Dennis upstairs. Inside his friend's apartment, Dennis finally broke down. He cleaned himself up, sat down, took a deep breath, and then he told him everything. The dreams, the girl, the rope, the statue, the clock, everything. When he finished, there was a long silence. Then the friend said softly, "It sounds like she doesn't want you there. Whoever she is, she's making it clear. You need to move out, Dennis. That place isn't for you." The next morning, Dennis couldn't stop thinking, not about the ghost, not about the nightmares, but about the woman from the management office. At first, she said there were no units available. Then, suddenly, 413 opened up. And not just that, she practically begged him to take it, slashed the rent, cut the deposit. It wasn't random, it wasn't lucky. She knew, she had to know. Dennis's fear turned into rage, a deep burning anger that pushed him through the exhaustion and humiliation. The next morning he went down to the office. The woman was there, seated behind the desk, sipping from a cup of tea, like it was just another quiet morning. Dennis didn't wait. He slammed his hands on the counter. "I want my money back," he said through clenched teeth. "Now." The woman blinked, startled, set her cup down slowly. "Excuse me?" "You gave me a haunted room," Dennis growled. "Don't act like you don't know, room 413. The one you said was unavailable at first, then suddenly it's open, with discounts. You knew what was in that room." His voice is shaking, not just from anger, but from the trauma of what he's been through. "Tell me the truth," he demanded. "What happened in that apartment?" The woman at the desk didn't flinch. She kept sipping her tea, eyes shifting to her computer screen, then back to Dennis. Her tone stayed neutral, even dismissive. "I'm so sorry you had a bad experience," she said. "But it's probably just stress. First time living alone. It always happens. I can't refund you just like that." Dennis couldn't believe it. "Seriously? That's all you're going to say? You gave me room 413. You knew." Still, she didn't budge. Her excuses came quick. "Tenants come and go, so the unit happened to open up." That's when Dennis snapped. "Fine," he said, voice cold. "If that's how it's going to be, I'm posting everything online. Full disclosure, with pictures, with the building's address. Let's see how long it takes before your landlord sees it and you lose your job." Just a side note, Dennis indeed, in fact, told the world. That's how we are able to share this story tonight. The room went silent. The woman's expression changed instantly. That thin professional smile vanished. She looked up slowly. Her voice was quieter now, measured. "Take it easy," she said. "No need to do anything impulsive. Let's just talk." Dennis didn't move. And finally, the woman exhaled. Then she began to talk. A few years ago, Unit 413 was rented to a young couple. They were a great-looking couple. They were both professors at a nearby university. One evening, the man went out late with his friends. The woman opened up Facebook to browse and came across an image of her boyfriend, tagged in the photo kissing another woman. The woman was riddled with emotion at the time, started hurting herself by hitting herself and beating herself with her own fists, punching her own face. Ultimately, she was so overcome with emotions, she hung herself from the fan. The whole floor of the apartment started experiencing weird things after this. It's said that the girl died exactly at 1:30 a.m., so every night around this time, her spirit would return to that building and terrorize all of the units on the 4th floor, causing many of the units on the 4th floor to move out at the time. Due to this issue, the landlord hired a shaman to write a talisman to seal her spirit inside the unit. That way she couldn't get out and terrorize the whole floor, which explains the talisman on Dennis's door. Once this talisman was in place, the complaints of ghosts and weird happenings totally stopped in the surrounding units. The emptied apartments slowly filling back up with new tenants. The landlord instructed the lady at the management to always leave 4013 empty and never rent it out. So it's always just been sitting empty all these years. Since this happened so long ago, and Dennis seems so desperate to live in this building, she most likely rented this unit to Dennis behind the landlord's back, meaning she wanted to pocket the rent money that Dennis would be paying. In the end, Dennis did get his money back. The woman realized that the threat to her job, her reputation, maybe even the building itself wasn't worth it. She quietly refunded everything, no more excuses, no more resistance. Dennis packed up what little he brought, left apartment 413 that same day, and never looked back. This very story that Dennis shared on the late-night radio station spread like wildfire across Thailand. Soon, the number 413 took on a new kind of fear. Hotels and apartments across the country reported trouble renting these rooms out with that number. Some of the newer buildings even skipped it altogether. So what do you guys think? Have you, or anyone you know, ever stayed in a room that just felt wrong? Let me know in the comments, and if you ever find yourself in front of a door marked 413, ask yourself, is it really empty? Or is something already waiting inside?